Welcome, everybody. Good evening. This is the Monday, August 26, 2019 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. The first item on our agenda, as always, is public input. If there should happen to be any member of the public here who wishes to speak on a matter that's not already on the board's agenda for tonight, now would be a perfect time to step up and say a few words. Seeing none, we will proceed with our agenda, beginning with the action items. First one being an approval not required plan for 80 Snow Road and 2 Graney Drive. 163 applicant, James Benincasa, 163, and Thomas DiGiuseppe owners. So what have we here?
Okay, so, and we do have the applicant here in the audience.
How you doing?
So if you would just want to come to the microphone. So for this A&R plan, there's a couple things that are going on. You have the existing house at 2 Graney Drive, and land that is being separated off from that and being swapped with land that is essentially off of Snow Road. You really have to look at the notes to sort of see what's going with what. You know, lot 1 and parcel B are together, parcel A and lot 2 are together, and then parcel 3 is off on its own with a little bit of parcel C. However, in going through discussing not only with the applicant but the engineer, having them come back, put a front yard setback on the side of the road off of Snow Road, reviewing with the building department, which isn't necessary for an A&R. Staff is of the opinion that the A&R it does not create a subdivision, that we also do have compliant lots, and recommends endorsement of the plan.
Yeah, so after I studied this for a little while, it looked to me like basically what we have is 2 existing lots, one large, one relatively modest, and we are slicing and dicing so as to get 3 lots out of the deal, all 3 having the required frontage and size and setbacks.
Correct.
And while the shape of the lots may be not quite the typical rectangular, more or less lot, they nevertheless do seem to accomplish the objective.
One of the things with A&R plans, and we discussed it at the counter, is that the first iteration it was still entitled to endorsement. However, as, say, a public service to the applicant, making sure that don't run into headaches with the building department, I always like to make sure that even though it's not required under the A&R process under subdivision control law, that at least we know we're not dealing with a zoning issue. That's why you see this lone front yard 30-foot setback, because of the angles involved. Wanted to make sure that we still complied with the lot width at setback. That's why that line's there. There's not any other side lot lines, and just that one line, just because we wanted to at least specify, because Bob next door is going to say once they go forward, record, and start preparing the plans, you comply with lot width. So that was reviewed with the building department. He at least signed off that it's not creating a zoning violation. Technically, even if it was, still entitled to endorsement.
Yep.
For some reason, I didn't see this earlier. The drawing's a little confusing to me. I don't necessarily understand the line from where it says parcel C back through 4 drill holes, horizontal line, up in the main drawing.
So
Well, all right.
parcel C is this
Yeah,
little
that's okay.
small
I'm just worried about the line that starts there.
2-foot.
Yeah, the line connecting the drill holes, or
Right.
connecting that point with the first
Yeah.
drill hole on the left.
I don't understand how the lots are being divided. Because I see, beside that little tiny bit, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 different.
Should be 4.
Well,
1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where you have to look at the detail that identifies. If I can get in there.
Where does parcel B fit into this? Where does, parcel A looks like a lot that only goes a little ways back.
Okay. Let's see if this will actually work well. So, parcel B
Parcel B.
is then merging with lot 1.
Yeah.
And then you have
Oh, okay.
lot 2.
Which is taking part of lot 1, which is partial A.
Whoops, sorry. I need to go back. Whoop.
Correct.
Yep.
One more. One more. Even drawing on.
Yeah, I think, Bob, I think that line connecting the drill holes is the current lot line.
Yes. When I was studying drawing, there was something called the alphabet of lines. And you'd use different kinds of lines to show things like lot lines versus,
They don't do that here, as we can
well,
see.
but that's what I'm getting to.
Yes, it
I,
should-
doesn't the Registry of Deeds or somebody like that have some rules about how these things are drawn?
Quite honestly, we have a surveyor stamp.
Well, I don't,
It falls, in my opinion, it falls on him and whether or not this detail in the plan is accepted by the registry.
I'm
of
not worried
Deeds.
about that little detail. I'm worried about, I don't know who parcel B belongs to, and I don't understand, I don't think I understand lot 2's frontage on a road.
Okay, well, parcel B goes with lot 1.
That should be, is that
That's a
stated?
notation, yes.
All right, okay. I haven't, as I said, I didn't get a chance to look at this.
And just to say what's on my mind, I know it's not necessarily necessary for our A&R purposes, but just to ask, is the intent to have new buildings be constructed on lots 2 and 3 here?
Correct. Yes.
And the driveway for lot 2 would of course kind of go up almost to the corner of Greenie there?
It will still be accessed off of Snow Road, probably closer to where it says 48.29.
Okay.
Probably be accessing it, probably right closer to
What
the,
he's talking
close to parcel C, like where it's, the arrow's going.
To your point, Bob, it would be helpful if these drawings more clearly distinguished between what is and what will be.
Yeah.
That's always been a point that I've had to stare at these things sometimes till my eyes cross to figure out what's current and what's future.
All right. Lot 1 is taking frontage from Greenie Drive. Lot 2 is taking frontage from Stowe Road.
Snow Road, yeah.
And I'm not clear whether, I'm not clear where Stowe Road stops, abutting, I know there's an issue out there. I'm not sure where Stowe Road, where Lot 3 has frontage.
On Snow Road.
It's not clear from this drawing because it says Grafton and Upton Railroad and it says Stowe Road and it doesn't show me where the two diverge.
Yeah, this drawing does not show.
Let's just pull up GIS so that you can see it. So this is the existing lot A. You have Snow Road and then you have the right-of-way for the railroad.
Yeah, and
So-
none of that's showing, if you zoom in there, that, I'm not sure whether, oh, maybe that is the, okay, is that the edge of the right of way?
The iron rod presumably is,
Well, I want the drawing to show me
it'd
that.
be nice if the drawing would actually
Well,
show.
no, it'll make a difference in how I vote. I'm not satisfied.
Not satisfied in what, that it's,
The
are you of the
drawings are
opinion
not,
it's
the
showing?
drawings are not adequate. But I'm only one vote, so it doesn't matter.
It's not clear, simply by looking at the drawing, it's not clear where the frontage on Snow Road ends.
It ends at the right of way.
Well, I mean, yeah,
But how do you, the drawing doesn't show where
Right.
that is.
Well, it shows just the point. I mean, it's,
It shows an iron rod,
yeah.
and it doesn't explain what that iron rod means any more than any of the others on the drawing. It doesn't say that's the end of right of way, for the road.
It's not
But
extraordinary.
don't worry about it.
So, with lot 3 abutting the railroad, would this change anything with regard to the railroad needing to install any safeguards or anything?
No. No, we're not encroaching or doing anything closer than what's already
No.
currently there.
I
Just
mean, there
checking.
is the grade crossing of the railroad at
Yeah.
Snow Road right there, but
That's
that's,
what I was thinking.
that has been there for ages and it will continue to be there.
Correct.
The proposed division of lots here doesn't change anything with
Yeah.
respect to any requirements under the railroad.
Right around here where the railroad and this are have been head scratchers, problematic for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, there used to be a house in where that lot 2 basically is.
Correct.
That
Yep.
is no longer there anyway.
That's correct. Yeah.
So one of the things that at some future date, the board can amend its subdivision rules regs to specify exactly how it wants those lines. There is no language that says what should be done.
Yeah, let's
So that's
Let's-
why,
keep that in mind for the future because these questions, the questions about interpretation of these A&R drawings come up repeatedly.
Yep.
Yeah, and one or the other of us has frequently had difficulty decoding these A&R plans, and it would be well worth our while to consider some requirements along the lines that we've touched on tonight and other times.
And consider that at least some of us had formal training in engineering drawing.
Even if they were a different weight.
there's always a difference between what maybe are best practices and then what we have here.
Right.
Yes.
The drawing doesn't tell me what I need to know to find that it's not a subdivision. Being a mere, what do we call it?
Board member?
No, not an expert.
Lay people.
Being lay people. Layperson.
Yes. All right. Well, given the reservations or comments some of us may have on the information or lack thereof in the drawing, is there anything of substance, more of additional, any additional questions or comments on this? If not, then perhaps a motion would be in order. And I could do it this way, the chair would entertain a motion that the board find that approval is not required and authorize the town planner to sign on behalf of the board.
So moved.
And did I hear a second?
Well,
Second.
yes, second,
Whatever.
All right.
whatever.
I think it was a simultaneous motion from both ends of the
But
table.
because I heard his second first before
Yeah.
Linda's
Yeah.
second, that means she made the motion.
Okay.
We got the second.
Sure. Whatever.
Let the record
Whatever
reflect
works.
it.
I have to clarify somehow for the minutes.
Small time warp there, but okay.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Hassinger made the motion and Mr.
Motion, the second.
Wood
Yeah.
seconded. And is there any discussion on the
him
motion? Well, the sound travels, the way the sound travels, the sound.
I know, and the right ear, no, the right ear doesn't hear as well.
All right, with no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Declare the motion carried by a vote of 4 in favor and 1 against.
Thank you, board.
And let's make a note of not forgetting that we have another item to add to our list of things we want to think about revising in our subdivision rules and regs.
If it's necessary, I'd like to see the standards that they require at the registry. I think they're the ones who set the standard, aren't they?
Then I'll look and see what
Yeah.
the standards are, and then at least we can say a plan drawn to standard.
Maybe our engineering consultant can tell us.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Is that something, are you sign that, do I come back tomorrow or get it?
Yes, come back around noontime. I'll sign it in the morning, and then we'll have that all ready for you to pick
Thank
up.
you, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
all right. All right, we have 14 minutes left.
I know.
Triple E spray deadline. All right, we have another approval not required plan at 71 to 73 Potter Hill Road.
And I found this one even harder to understand than the previous.
But we saw this before, didn't we?
We
This,
saw
this is a previous special permit, yes.
something
not the
related to
A&R,
this.
Not the A&R.
No, we
but
didn't see the
permit.
A&R. We saw the flexible development special permit. And I just took a quick glance at that this afternoon, and the plan on this flexible development special permit was not this. That is, this proposes a particular division into lots that the flexible development special permit did not.
Really?
At least the one plan I looked at with the,
There would have been two, because they would have had to have shown,
Flex and conventional.
exactly.
possibly I
yeah.
looked at the wrong one.
On the linked thing, there was only one plan set that we did with the meeting minutes link. Not minutes, but materials.
All right, but was there, there are two, yes, there were, right. So this does correspond to the third plan, and that I only looked at the very first page of that, but this does correspond to the third page of that flexible development plan. Yes, it does.
So you had
Right, so the first,
the first plan was the existing conditions.
existing
Second was
The
the
conventional.
conventional, and then the
was-
third was the flexible.
Yes, if I'd actually took the time to look at all, I said I just glanced at it, literally, that's all I did. But yes, this plan seems to correspond to the flexible plan,
Yes.
which,
Which is what the board had in its decision. Had decision final. Had specified, let me just go to the condition specifically. Could be total number of dwelling units that could be developed under this flexible development special permit. We have then a condition that where was it? The A&R plan needed to be following the expiration of appeal period and the decision and recording at the registry of deeds, the applicant shall submit a plan conforming to section 3.1 of subdivision rules and regs entitled plan believed not to require approval, containing notation that the subject is the plan is subject to flexible development special permit SP 2018-13. So that brings in, because otherwise we would have been denying the flexible development and saying just do the conventional. So this brings in that plan. What is a little frustrating is that sometimes when you record things at the registry of deeds, sometimes I swear you're at the whim of whoever is there and whether or not they had a good day. They would not accept the recording of the decision without the plan. So we had in a condition saying you need to add in the date that and the book and page number for that decision. They tried to do it on 2 occasions, got denied both times, which is quite frankly amazing because we record flexible development bylaws all the time with no plan. So for whatever reason, they're saying that it also is associated with an A&R plan, which didn't make sense. But that's why there's this notation up top left corner, basically referring to that special permit, and they'll record the A&R plan and the decision all at the same time.
Right, so yes, this is exactly the lot layout that the board, and back in December, that, the applicant did say, and we have that documented in the findings, that their intent was to pursue the flex.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was my biggest confusion, like what was changing on this A&R, and I guess it's nothing.
No, literally the only thing from that plan is the notation that they have in the top left corner.
Okay.
Okay.
Just see the required frontage. I think it's down here. Need better tools.
So what's the next
80 feet, okay.
Bob's
We
looking at
move.
something.
Somebody's got to do a motion.
I thought that 80 sounded low except for cul-de-sac, but it's not true. It's okay.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Would there be a motion?
There would.
The chair would entertain a motion that the board find that approval is not required and authorize the town planner to sign on behalf of the board.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declared motion carried unanimously. Our next action item is yet another request for determination of minor modification for an existing cell tower with antennas to be replaced.
Was expecting the person to be here to talk about the request. I did have some back and forth with Bob, just a little bit as far as trying to get additional information as far as where this facility is located and if there was an existing site plan that they were submitting or would submit. What's interesting is even in our file, out of about 4 different decisions, 3 of which are modifications, there's only 1 site plan. And Bob, this is it. This is the extent of the site plan on our file.
Well,
So
I was looking at this on a large, not this screen, but a
Yeah.
desktop screen, and you couldn't see that the roads actually are shown,
yeah,
I guess because of the way it's scanned or something. But
most likely,
this
probably.
does show us
Yeah.
enough.
So
I happen to know where it is because I was on the original, of course. And they originally wanted a site on the other side of Brown's Road, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really? Oh.
They had to move to this
Yeah.
side.
So similar to for board members, similar to a couple other requests, this application is specifically requesting a determination that a minor modification to allow 3 additional antennas and remote radio units to the existing tower for T-Mobile at 160 Rear Upton Street. When you review the letter, that went along with it, it's clear that they're not making any changes to the site. They're basically swapping out the antennas. They're adding additional, whoops, I want to get the plan. They're adding additional panel. So the gray ones, what you see up there, are existing, and then the ones in the middle end up being the proposed. They end up being at the same height as what's currently installed. They're not proposing any changes to the site plan. They're not adding any cabinets. Where was the? Sorry, as I'm fumbling through these plans. So, T-Mobile already was at the top of this monopole. They're not adding additional cabinets. They're just running the cables down to existing cabinetry. Staff feels that this is consistent with past requests that have been in front of the board for minor modification of a wireless facility.
Are you saying you were able to go back to the original permit and didn't have a drawing?
This is the drawing that I had was basically the only one
Yeah.
that I found,
But
and it was just sort of like that.
but
Enclosure.
was that for the original?
That
Because I'm virtually sure there were plans.
there were. It involves going into the vault.
Yeah,
It's not
okay, but
something that we have
That's
scanned.
fine. I just,
Yeah.
there were plans with the original
Yeah.
because we could not possibly have.
No, of course you would have approved the road, all that stuff coming in from right
We
opposite.
also had to see the distances because there were people just over on the Brown Road side
Yeah.
that back up to it who
Yeah.
were concerned about the distance.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, I think we should now move that we find that it's a minor modification and grant it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. The board finds that this is a minor modification and the board grant same. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Declare motion carried unanimously. Moving on. Action item D. Mr. Katie, it's your turn. This is a request for determination of completeness and request for final inspection for Dendy Acres subdivision, DeRosa's Landing off Elmwood Avenue. Charles Katie Jr. applicant. So we are here. Finally.
Come on
Everything's all
up.
done.
I have a seat.
Yes.
Yes, please, make yourself
Yeah, a
comfortable.
request of
Not too comfortable.
determination
Here
of-
forever.
Oh, yeah. Request for determination of completeness on Dendy Acres. And I think Joe must have all the information on that, correct?
Yeah, so today we had received, and I was just looking to see this morning, Charlie, Jeff Walsh, and Steve Lemoyne with South Grafton all met at the site. We're missing DPW as well as engineering, but they were there on a previous site visit. Basically just to take one last look at the development and see is there any reason not to recommend acceptance. The roadway has been down since November 2016, the pavement rather. So we've gone through two winter cycles. The detention basin is in good shape. Jeff Walsh had reviewed the roadway acceptance plans as well as the layouts. And basically we have documentation from Graves Engineering identifying that there's no additional issues that are needed to be addressed. The applicant and his attorney had revised descriptions that Jeff had previously identified needed revisions from that last letter. Those have all been addressed. And I'm trying to see if we had one other thing here. We also have a letter or email from Steve Lemoyne basically saying that there are no outstanding issues with the subdivision. I've been working with Charlie to try to pull together these very last minute. Usually we like giving ourselves a lot more time with these requests. They did submit the layout plan as well as the legal descriptions today to the Board of Selectmen. The layout hearing would be advertised for October 8th. For town meeting, it does require having that layout hearing. We have Graves Engineering's basically opinion that they've addressed all of the issues. What would be left for the excuse me, for the board is consideration of the request that the subdivision be determined complete. A vote waiving the 18 months per the letter that was submitted prior to our last meeting, requesting final inspection and determination completeness, and then ultimately a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to place it on the warrant to hold a layout hearing.
So moved.
Second.
I heard him.
I heard him too. Yes, I did.
Is there anything else that needed to be?
No.
Yeah. Moved and seconded that,
All those things.
all those things. I guess we find it complete, waive the 18 months,
Yes.
forward it to the Board of Selectmen. Does that basically cover it?
Correct.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously.
And it didn't affect my vote, Joe, but isn't October 8th late for the town meeting vote, or is that?
No, it's town meeting's October 21st. It will be on the warrant.
Yes.
The board can always pass over an article if for
Yeah.
some reason something fell through.
Okay.
It's not as much time, but it's what,
Yeah.
with notice in the paper and all that stuff.
Yeah, I know end of September is when the warrant articles have to be in by, that's why I
Yep.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But they'll put a warrant article in.
Yes.
Okay.
Joe, Cindy had told me that the 1st of October, but you must have talked to her since then.
Oh, what a,
Either way, I know it was scheduled, and whether it was an 8 or a 1, those are usually not similar numbers. So hopefully, my mind is just imagining 8 that it was the first. But
Okay.
either way, it's still in advance of
Yeah.
town meeting.
Either way, it didn't affect my vote, so
Yeah.
that works for me.
sufficient for our purposes to know that we've done our part.
Yeah.
And the select board intends to do what they need to do, if all goes well, in time to get this completed successfully at town meeting.
Sometimes these get a lot tighter than this. You know, selectmen might lay out a decree,
Yep.
the night before or
Yeah.
whatever.
And you are correct. It is October 1st.
Oh, okay.
Alrighty,
Okay, we're good?
we're
We
good.
good.
Vote.
Okay.
What? I
Thank
think
you.
we just did vote.
Did we?
Yes.
You moved it.
I moved it, I didn't vote it.
I heard you say
Aye.
aye. I heard you say aye.
No, I didn't. Never happened.
They both heard me say it second. Before
Yeah, no, I said I heard him.
Yeah.
okay,
Troublemakers around here. I
moving
don't
on.
All right, we have a draft decision,
know.
item E.
It being 7:30.
Yes, it being 7:30, yes, let's dispose of our public hearings in
Sure thing.
rapid fire fashion, as it were. We had a hearing scheduled for the Riding subdivision. This is on the definitive plan approval. And I understand that the applicant has requested that they be allowed to withdraw the application for the purpose of completing the review with the Conservation Commission before they continue with the planning board review of the definitive plan.
Correct. At the Conservation Commission's last meeting, they had additional survey work that needed to be done for the wetlands. As such, Conservation continued that to September 17th. We then would have been looking at a continuance to October. I, at that point, recommended the applicant consider withdrawing the application, and then we can resend out abutters notices, and we don't have to worry about getting extensions because, as you know, with definitive, we actually, under the subdivision control law, we have a time frame we need to act on that unless extended by the applicant. I don't like then extending hearings and then extending deadlines to file a decision. There's more of a potential to lose track of things. Plus, you lose track of people who are following the hearing. This will allow them to do the work that's necessary. We re-advertise, and we can basically try to go towards completion at that point.
And
So they did identify that they intend to refile once they work through some issues with conservation.
Yeah, their letter does say they also request that we waive the application fees. That's something we handle in a vote now, or is that when they reapply, or?
I'd recommend, at least as part of this, just to waive the application fee. It's not waiving the public hearing fee. That still needs to be paid. And they still have to do the any peer review that's going to be needed. So it's not like they're getting out scot-free.
The thing is that if they do refile soon, that's one thing. But if it goes on, and then it goes on some more, and then it goes on some more before it does actually get filed, got to think a little bit more about it, or if it gets changed significantly.
Yeah.
So I just assume do the fee. No, we can indicate probably going to be okay with it if they do, but wait to grant it until.
That's fine as well.
So the important point about this, though, is that it's a withdrawal without prejudice.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing I wanted to bring up. The request doesn't request that, but we exchanged messages about it today, because they didn't ask for it to be without prejudice.
Right.
Joe points out that it should be, it's an implication, because they say that they intend to refile.
Yeah, I mean, if the board did not, then they have to wait 2 years. Or they can resubmit, and the board needs to make a determination whether or not it's enough of a change from the previous one. We know they're wanting to resubmit once they get some of this stuff done with conservation, and actually going through conservation and planning at the same time is sort of in, I think, everyone's best interest. So all of a sudden you're not, planning board approves changes, then they're going back to conservation. It's nice to come across the finish line together with a complete plan rather than staggered. And that's why we're actually in this mess in the first place, is because they really came forward with us without starting that conservation process.
Yeah.
But
And there's
how
so
long
much
has this been
wetlands
going
involved.
on with us?
This
Long
hearing, the application was actually submitted February 2019.
Yeah,
So, and the first public hearing was March, and we only had like one public hearing, and then it was continued. So,
yeah. But we also spent a lot of time on the preliminary plan and special permit. didn't we?
yeah, and that was approved back in April 2017.
Yeah, it's been
And
a
so
long
it started maybe before the beginning of 2017.
Correct.
It started in 2016.
And it was probably, I think, if memory serves, it was like June. We didn't hit a year, but we were getting close.
Well, there's so much wetlands involved.
And also, they're dealing with Westboro as well.
Yes. Okay.
I'll make the motion that we grant the applicant's request to withdraw, and we add without prejudice, excuse me, so that they may refile within those 2 years.
There's any 2 years about it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, within the 2 years.
That's what you don't have to, all you have to do is just say
Sure,
without.
Without prejudice, yeah.
without prejudice.
Second that. All right, moved and seconded that the board grant the applicant request to withdraw and explicitly say the withdrawal is without prejudice.
Correct.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, declare that motion carried unanimously. And our next public hearing is for 11 Wheeler Road, the major residential special permit, for which we have the applicant's written request to continue.
And the purpose is,
Let's see. They want some time to not only meet with me, but to discuss other potential feasible development options for the property. So when we had that public hearing, he said, we want you to give additional considerations. So we tentatively have a meeting later on this week just to sort of go over what they're looking at. But at least it gives them a little time as trying to respond to the board's requests at the last hearing.
Okay. Move that we grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until September 9th at 7:30.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Declare that motion carried unanimously. We have one more public hearing on our schedule, for which we also have a written request to continue.
Correct. And just so you know, this request came from our special counsel that was approved by the Board of Selectmen to assist the planning board and myself, so that we could make the most of bringing up to speed special counsel, and to prevent everyone bringing all their consultants and attorneys to basically get nowhere at a meeting. I had asked the applicant that they request to the planning board for a continuance to September 9th. It's truly a feast or famine with these. We're either here until midnight or we get continuances.
Can you tell us anything about the special counsel?
Yes, what I'll do is forward you
Okay, I
off
understand.
their sort of profile. I'll forward that off to the board.
Where is he based on?
They're based out of Wellesley. They do a lot of town council work for municipalities as well as assistance on wireless facilities. The attorney that will be helping us is actually ZBA member in Wellesley as well. So he knows the local side, being on a board, as well as the legal side.
Do you know if he's familiar with our consultant, our wireless consultant?
Yes, he is.
I would hope so. But
Yes.
And we're still well within the shot clock, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Move that we grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until September 9th, 2019 at 7:30.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue to September 9th. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. That takes care of our public hearings for tonight, unlike our previous two marathon meetings. So, we could still make this a long meeting if we try.
yeah,
You'll have to try hard.
Yes. So, our next action, going back to our action items. Our next action item is a draft decision for the special permit for an accessory apartment at 11 Putnam Lane.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I
In
just
reading
looked
through
through
this-
it, didn't see any problem.
I didn't see a single typo, which was surprising.
Yep.
I don't know how that. Well, Dave's in charge of typos.
I did not.
Can you zoom?
I don't recall seeing anything in this that I cared to pick at.
Amazing.
So if the board has no suggestions or revisions or changes, perhaps a motion would be in order to do this.
So moved.
Second.
Do this in the usual way.
Yes, I suppose to be slightly more precise to,
Okay, who seconded? And who moved?
Bob moved and Justin seconded.
Yes.
Okay.
And to flesh out the motion just slightly, I assume that the motion intends to grant the applicant's requests for the waivers. There were like 8 of them. And that the motion is to approve the special permit and site plan with the conditions as drafted.
That's correct.
Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in
Aye.
favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare that motion carried unanimously. We have one more draft decision to look at.
I didn't see any typos in this either.
And I think
Um,
this afternoon I forwarded a proposed correction to staff.
What was yours? Because I sent a couple.
Let me see.
Oh, read it closely.
It was somewhere around finding 6
and Bob, your email came in
or
at
finding 5 and
about 6 o'clock, so I didn't get here until about 6:40, so I didn't have a chance to really take a look at yours. You said finding 6?
It was either 5 or 6. I think it was 6. It was the inspector of determined.
Yeah, that was 6.
He is a very determined person. I mean, I still think that was a very apt description.
All right,
Oh,
first,
5, yes.
And that correction is in the document that's posted on the website.
Okay, so finding 2 within the district requires the issuance of special permit. So that's the first. Then number 5, let's see, a mix up on cut and paste.
yeah, I'm not sure that, did you get number 2?
Yes.
Number 2 is just a letter.
Yep, I got that. I just
Typo.
put that in.
Okay, 5, I think is what we're talking about. The board finds that the inspector of buildings, this is reading correctly. When I was reading it,
Yeah, it's reading
when I was reading at home, there was something wrong with that.
You said you fixed.
That was the same correction, Dave.
Oh, okay.
Hmm?
It was the
Oh, that was saved?
yeah
All right, and then 12G.
12. Whoops.
Oh.
Sorry.
I was concerned about 12G. It's waiving stamped plans, but it's also waiving an applicant owner indicating the site will be maintained with standards set forth in section 4.1. And I think we should have that commitment.
I'm just pulling up the zoning bylaw. So section 4.1 talks about general performance standards. Yeah, it's just general performance standards. So when we look at it basically, because section G talks about written standards as part of a submission requirement, I don't think it has an impact as far as their lack of having to follow through with these on permits associated with filing with the building department. So we have building structures and land shall comply with these standards. Must comply with air pollution, air quality, DEP, various things. No heat or glare. Waste must follow regulations, state of public health. and then storage of materials that basically would be subject to the fire department review, which all would be reviewed for a CO. Very often, I don't think, I'd have to probably look back that
Yeah,
this was based off of a model decision that we did for the chiropractor's office. I'm trying to remember in how that came up because
well, the way it reads, we need a written statement from the applicant slash owner indicating site will be maintained with standards set forth, maintained with. And either that language shouldn't be there, or we need to understand where it came from.
so let me then go to section 3, 1.3.
Well, this is, oh, okay.
But it-
1.3, yeah, 1334, right.
Yeah, so here, these are submittal requirements, then right here under this section, is that pertinent?
Yep. It requires a statement.
Yep. So that's where they don't have that, so they're requesting that waiver.
Why don't they have a statement that they're going to maintain it?
The board could not grant that waiver and say you need to provide a letter stating that the property shall be maintained in accordance with section 4.1.
So moved as
Yeah.
an amendment.
Yeah, these are, these are the findings.
Yeah. Now, also,
Yep.
also, you're gonna have to go down to,
I have a minor thing.
under waivers.
Yeah.
Real
Yep.
quick,
On the finding, the applicant did make this request, correct?
Right.
Request for the waiver.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
this is the documenting that the applicant requested the waiver.
Yeah.
This is not addressed whether we grant the waiver.
Correct.
Although I will suggest that in that G there, it might better read section 4.1 instead of 4/1.
Yeah.
and I will say, Joe, while I'm seeing it, under findings, there is 2 12s.
Yes, I was about to point that out.
Oh,
Auto numbering didn't work,
no.
Nope.
Oh, well, it's,
or maybe it wasn't auto numbered.
those were, and somehow that one ended up not. Okay.
Thank you, Word.
Okay, so then,
Under the waivers,
Yes.
section G,
Just-
1333G.
Yeah, so under the, right, we could, under the waiver section there, we can.
so what I'll do is,
Right,
is
part of it.
then have, a separate thing under here that says, a waiver was not granted for section 1.3.3.3.
G,
G,
part 2.
and
Right, your suggestion is that we don't grant the waiver, we don't allow them to get out of providing their statement that they will
Right,
maintain.
right, well, he's trying to,
So that's, yeah. That's, here again, we get that 4/1.
actually, I'd say we deny the request, then we grant a request for half of it and have a condition for the other half, or something along those lines. Anyway, whatever
Whatever you type.
Joe's comfortable with.
Yes, if that's the sense of the board, that we just not grant the waiver for that one particular part, that one particular part,
And I'd even move that
then,
as asking for an amendment from Joe.
Unless someone has an objection, I don't think we even need to do
Oops.
a vote for this change.
No, they requested a waiver.
Yeah.
I think
yes, and when we vote on the decision,
Yeah, that's our vote.
the vote will be for waivers excluding that one requested waiver that we don't grant.
and then well,
And there will be-
but we can, that one request asks for two things, one of which we can grant and
Yes.
one that we can't grant. So if we deny, the request overall, then, you have to figure out how to,
Yeah, I think that's what Joe's trying to,
well, yeah, well, we can grant a waiver that wasn't requested, so
Yes.
we can deny the
We can-
request as made,
then go ahead and grant a waiver for the half and vote a condition for the other half. Joe's busy getting it right.
Okay, so how I'm handling it is, at least how I'd like to handle it, is in the waivers, that to grant the applicant's request of waivers from the following requirements of section 1.3.3.3 of the zoning bylaw, except as noted, then comma, with regard to preparing site plan, blah, 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 blah. And then under here at the end saying, except that the board the board denied the requested waiver under section 1.3.3.3.G for written statement from the applicant owner indicating site will be maintained with standards set forth in section 4.1 of the zoning bylaw. I have then as a condition, prior to submission of the application for a building permit, the applicant shall provide written statement, basically then just repeating that. Written statement to the board that the applicant owner indicating, from the applicant owner indicating site will be maintained with standards set forth in 4.1.
Right, that doesn't strike me as particularly burdensome on the applicant. They can send us a letter with that one sentence in it.
Yeah. Now, I had one other thing in my email, look.
Okay.
And that was, I recall talking about wanting to be quite clear about which areas of the building were getting what uses and what parking requirements. I wasn't sure that what we had on file was adequate. And I didn't, maybe you've covered it, but I didn't, I asked whether I was missing coverage of that.
So, how it was handled was basically referencing Exhibit 6, which is the parking plan, and then identifying that the inspector buildings determined that the parking associated with the pre-existing residential use was not considered part of the special permit application before the board, see Exhibits 8 and 10, and that the board finds the inspector building determined that there was adequate parking to support the retail establishment in the front portion of the building, Exhibit 11. Are you looking for something a little bit more specific than that?
The front portion, did you say?
And
Which one is that in?
6.
6. Adequate parking support in the front. The front portion of the building, it goes from all the way from left to right.
So we could specify it as the parking lot at the adjacent in the intersection of Bridge Street and Worcester Street.
That's not my problem. My problem is if some of what's, well, first of all, storage, use of storage doesn't require any parking at all.
Correct.
And the use of the store, the retail store has a requirement, so many
Correct.
spaces per.
Yep.
I'm trying for the decision to be very clear,
so
if ever the case comes that some of what's now storage space gets converted, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure that the
So-
plan we had is adequate.
Okay. So let's.
So we talked about at least stating what was understood and, what area the,
I did notice there's a letter sent by Bob Berger today that explicitly calls out that,
today.
yes, concur the minimum parking space would require 5 parking spaces, which one would have to be handicap accessible. It does not call out dimensions, however, between storage and retail.
And that's predicated on, I don't know, I don't think the plan is adequate.
So that would be based on the exhibit of the proposed storage and retail space submitted with the application. and that at a minimum, that needs to be maintained for the site.
You know, but I want that to be clear. This property is, no, we've seen different things happen with this property over the years.
You could basically make a finding that the proposed use as submitted in the application and as identified in Exhibit 14 requires 5 more parking spaces, then have a condition saying any change in use that increases parking required must come back for the board for determination whether it requires modification.
Well, but change from.
That would be even decrease of storage
No,
that
no,
then
no.
results in.
Change, all you have is a pencil sketch.
Yep.
You don't have an engineer's drawing.
Mhm.
Pencil sketch is sketchy.
Mhm.
Trying to nail it down so that there's no ambiguity in the future.
Mhm.
At least it should say as, as depicted in the submission. As the, whatever it is,
Could we
eastern side or the southern side.
possibly work backwards on this for our decision where we say that Bob's note where we have 5 required parking spaces, we say if the retail area is to exceed this square footage, would that be?
We don't have a square footage.
Yeah, although there's an implication that there are measurements existing somewhere, because Mr. Berger's note here says, I verified the
original
measurements of the office space. So
True.
if those measurements were documented as part of this decision in some fashion, that would be a little bit more concrete information.
Yeah, I'd like it to be in our records. I'd like a document of what we're talking about to be in our records.
Are you looking for something that then, because you are correct in that the material that was submitted was hand-drawn. Are you specifically looking for something that requires that to be more formalized?
I'd like that, but at least we have to say what we're basing it on. Square footage or,
So what I can do is, Exhibit 1, I added language under 6 that basically said that the board finds that the inspector of buildings determined that there was adequate parking to support the retail establishment in the front portion of the building, Exhibit 11, and that for the proposed uses detailed in the application Exhibit 1, that 5 parking spaces are required for the use.
With one handicap, with one being handicapped.
well, that's,
I don't know if that's
yeah,
worth calling out.
that's up to.
Is that 5 additional parking?
No, that's devoted to that retail use. I can add that, I mean, we can take that
If we're using
hand-drawn drawing and then just identify a finding that says, based on the application submittal requirements, it was calculated that the retail store consisted of, and I'm just throwing a number, 800 square feet, resulting in
Yes.
parking requirement of this,
Okay,
and then have that as a finding, and then we can go into the rest of that.
and I would put that minimum 5 parking spaces just to be
Yeah.
consistent with both Bob's language and
that's fine.
Okay, so. I'm just leaving that for a note for myself to because I need to calculate that out. But we already know from Bob where that worked out to be, and he took the widest and then the depth, because it basically was sort of an odd quadrangle that resulted in that calculation. He took the widest dimension to be the most conservative.
Yeah, so he actually calculated a number for square footage
Exactly.
of retail space.
Yeah.
And that's what we'd like to document here.
Yep.
I think. And that, if it should, well, that's for the future, but that's, that's providing a foundation that this is based on an assumption of X number of square feet of retail space. So
As
the
shown,
implication-
as shown in exhibit,
Yes.
whatever, one.
Yeah.
The implication being if they expand the retail space, that's a modification, that's something would require a modification of the permit.
Yep.
Are we all happy?
Do we have anything else to,
I have nothing more to add to this.
then perhaps a motion would be in order?
Grant that we, move that we grant the application with the waivers, findings, and conditions drafted and discussed,
With the modifications discussed.
with the modifications
Meeting
as
here.
discussed.
Yep.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded that we grant the special permit with waivers, findings, waivers, conditions as drafted and modified during this discussion. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare that motion carried unanimously. And we have one more action item on the agenda.
So because I see them here, I'm just gonna let them know. I'm gonna make these changes tomorrow. We'll file that with the town clerk and then prepare a letter, basically identifying what that process for recording the decision is and the appeal period. And then if you have questions on gathering things for like building department and all that stuff, we can coordinate that discussion with Bob. Okay? Okay, sure thing.
Have a good evening.
Thank
You
you.
too.
You too. Okay. I intended for this last item to put together a little proposal for you. Time got away from me for this meeting for doing that. However, what would like to be able to do is last summer the Planning and Conservation Department had hired an intern to walk with a hand GPS unit town parcels, conservation lands that have trails. We have the rough data with trails that when Rachel was here, she was starting to work and do some quality control on them. She, of course, left back in January, so that data is basically, while we have some draft maps, some of that trail data needs to be sort of quality controlled, as well as identify where trails go onto private property and what needs to be done in order to relocate those. In talking with CMRPC as well as Leah, because the technical assistance hours are somewhat limited, this actually, in our mind, makes for a really good project, moving something along that really can accentuate and be of use to the town by finally completing some of the mapping of conservation lands. We know from dealing with the project for 155 George Hill that mapping of some, whether it's our lands or even other conservation lands, is not popping up on our internal GIS, and this would be at least a good opportunity to start to get some of that information in, first by doing quality control so we can add it as a layer within our web-based GIS, but then second, planning and conservation really wants to be able to put together some trail maps and start working with conservation and their trails committee to improve some of the trails within town. So this document here basically just lays out, and Bob and I had a conversation about this, that the planning board delegate is sort of gets to be the deciding vote as far as identifying how local planning assistance hours gets used, and like to have it for that GIS mapping project.
Well, first of all, they're not asking for what is it gonna be used for, they're asking for who is gonna tell them.
Correct.
They wanna have one person to tell them. Now, as chairman of the commission and chairman of the executive committee where we discussed this, and I talked to him about why this hasn't gone out the last few years. I'm very involved with this. Also, as you see, each town gets 12 hours, and then we get up to 12 more hours for people from Grafton representatives participating in commission activities, and I do 1 hour for each activity. And I do far more than the 12 hours. I do 12 hours just on one of the 3 or 4 committees I'm on. And I have been doing that for 27 years. So you could make the chair, most places that don't have that background, would the first thought is, and the default condition is the planning board chair would be the one who says. In this case, I'd suggest that's okay, but given my background, maybe I should be. And if I am, it's not gonna be a problem.
That would make a certain amount of sense.
Yes.
My only question, Joe, is this similar to the project that I was kind of mentioning in passing with you? I know it was just an email between two of us about getting the trails that were in the Grafton Land Trust into our GIS. Is that what I?
This is
It's similar,
but
Yeah, tangential.
unrelated. So the main thing is that Justin and I had an email as far as after the 155 George Hill Road, like how do we get some of the trail data actually in? One of the tough things is that like that information isn't on the Grafton Land Trust either. But that is a start as far as having within our GIS system the tools that then identify where there are trails so that we can make determinations as far as connecting open space, connecting recreational opportunities, but then also identifying what impacts to those facilities are from applications in front of the board. And Rob Aberg with the Grafton Land Trust has expressed willingness to share that data with us. And then it becomes a question as far as basically then just sort of identifying budget dollars to have our GIS consultant convert the data and then prepare a GIS layer that then has that trail data. In some ways, it would be nice to be able to get, and that's why sort of it dovetails very nicely in with if we can get CMRPC to help with the town conservation land, because then you can bring it all together and just update one layer at once, rather than being charged a certain amount to do it here and then another amount to then bring that all in together. But it is related. It's only separate in that we're dealing with two different data sets.
Yep.
Basically making sure that Grafton Land Trust is comfortable providing that as a service to the town.
Are both data sets compatible? You know, Are they?
Yeah.
There have been times in the past, I think, when GIS information didn't always come through in compatible forms.
They currently last fall they asked for a basically a most recent copy of our GIS data so that they could then update some of their information. And then once you're dealing with ArcView, ArcGIS, coming up with a standard way of doing it. That's where how they then do things, it's sort of like, you know, with engineers. Well, I like doing this. I like my lines this way. I know you need to do your lines this way. It ends up being the same argument that you have with GIS software engineers as far as how to then put that into our GIS system.
I think I'm remembering that the open space and recreation plan, which at some point will hopefully be completed, among other things, did call for the construction of a town-wide database of trails, whether
Yep.
land trust, whether town-owned, whether privately owned.
Yeah.
We talked about as one of our objectives to be to get that, make that all come together, which is
Yeah.
part of what we're just talking about here.
Yep.
Would that be a layer that you can see on MapGeo?
Yes. Yeah. That would be the idea, is to have that as, and that's why we'd want to do quality control before. I mean, I could have them do it internal, so at least I know where things are, but then there are sections where trails that unknowingly went onto private property and you may not have easements or agreements to allow for that to happen. That's why conservation wants to start look at where things deviate from their land onto private property and then work to relocate those.
Do you have any sense of whether the 24 hours is sufficient?
I had already talked with Trish as identifying as far as whether or not this sounded like a good project.
Well, I suggest that we move, that we do this the way I said, and
Yeah, so the action item here would be for the board to vote that the contact for the LPA hours be our planning board member and primary CMRPC delegate, Mr. Hassinger.
So moved.
Second.
So moved and seconded that Bob be the point person for all this. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously.
So then, tied to that, and this is really a question for Bob then, as far as determining the use and what is then a eligible and worthwhile project. How do we then?
she's just gotta hear me say it's okay. I guess we have to see what it is, write down what it is, and,
I guess that ends up being the question. I'll put in writing exactly what.
She can help, I think she can help you figure out. And I,
Okay,
not gonna.
that's all I know.
All right, so we have completed our action items. And next on our agenda is a discussion item, deliberation on the Brigadi Village Special Permit. I see that we have an audience who is interested in this topic. I will just remind everybody that we have closed the public hearing on this. We have thus accepted and put on the record all of the input, all the information and public comments and everything else that will factor into our decision. So the point of this deliberation is to at least begin work on preparing a draft decision to give staff some guidance as to any particular points that staff needs the board's opinion on in order to proceed with drafting a decision. Correct?
Correct. So, in past instances where we've had more need for deliberation sessions, staff has sort of prepared a sort of a review as far as what we've received, and then also what we need to start doing for findings. Because of having essentially 3 meetings back to back, all with decisions and other deadlines, I was not able to provide such a document for the board for tonight's meeting to sort of go by. For the next meeting, I would like to, but I guess one of the things to sort of ask the board would be if there's any sort of structure you'd like to see as far as we start reviewing this material, or whether or not staff just starts diving in. So. And when I mean diving in, basically starting with the findings first, the findings section. As far as laying out the material that's submitted, some of the high points, and then identifying the findings under the bylaws that we need to consider and make.
Well, most of the issues I think we've chased down to a point where people are okay with them, or settled on a position on them. I will say, I'm still not at all comfortable with the length of dead end issue. I've been consistent with that for 27 years, and I'm still not comfortable with it. If I'm the only one, that's okay.
What would be the length of dead end, Bob?
It's partly an argument of how you measure it. The rule is 500 feet. 500 feet only just barely gets you into the project, because it starts out at Church Street.
Church Street.
And it's, I don't know, I've forgotten the number, but it's like 300 feet up West Street.
4.
Before you cross into the subdivision. So most of that loop is beyond the 500 feet. If it's a completed loop paved, then you measure to the most distant point on the loop. If it ends, then you measure all the way around to it. But the more generous one, just up here to the point, is still, I think I don't know, it was like 900 feet or
And
something like that.
that may be one of the things we want to start with, because when we did, this is the first I'm hearing as far as if you close the loop, you pick the furthest point. It's
I've
not.
tried to say that every time. That's it.
It's not identified in the regs,
Right.
and it's not what was even
but
raised
it-
during Clearview. So
Years ago, when we had very serious issues around this, we looked at the law, went to previous cases and so on. In fact, I can't remember the name of the subdivision, is the one, Foster Eaton's subdivision.
was that Countryside?
You go past the children's center on the way in,
The ELC?
Hmm?
The EL on,
Are you talking about
off of
on
Bruce Street.
yeah,
on Old Westboro Road?
No,
No.
no, it's right on 122 Pollard Street and Bruce Street, right? Pollard Road and Bruce Street.
well,
That intersection.
no,
Yeah.
122 and Bruce go a little bit towards the center and turn right.
Okay.
And there's a daycare, big daycare in that, or at least it was a daycare.
Yeah, that's,
That's ELC.
That's ELC.
That's ELC you're talking.
But you're
Elliott
talking you're talking right, Elliott Trail you're talking about,
Elliott Trail.
that subdivision.
We looked at it there, but also we looked at it on what became the 40B. That's the one where we tracked down an almost identical case that supported our position about how you measure that. But that's the most sensible thing. What's the length of a cul-de-sac when there's a loop road? It says, basically it says something like no point may be more than 500 feet, I think, from, if you read the bylaw, or read the rule.
I think one of the challenges, and this is where maybe, you're able to stop by to identify for me where this is, because I don't consider the loop road a cul-de-sac. I consider where,
I'm only calling it, no, it's not a cul-de-sac,
right,
but it's a single entrance. I'll look around for it.
and that's where our subdivision rules and regs specifically say, dead-end street, so
Well,
that,
I
I'm just looking for guidance, because I'm gonna have to write it, and I need to sort of understand things a little bit
if
more.
no one else objects, then it's not an issue. Because, there are enough votes.
But I feel strong, I've felt strongly forever about it, so it's on my,
Yeah, I'll say my leaning is that if we did the grass pavers, that it is a little, pretty much too long of a thing. Even thinking about people gonna walk across them to get toward Church Street, but having the paved over that, it does alleviate how I read the bylaws as, an issue with regard to dead end street. Now, I don't dispute that there could be case law around that, but that's just my read of it. So,
I had a few questions to talk about. So, still newer. Overall, very supportive of having a project like this come up. The questions I had, in which I think Mr. Brigatti and team did clarify, one was they would have the conversation with the church so that there could be some facility available for the kids to have a bus stop or something of that order. And the second one was the bus cannot come into private property, school bus
Correct.
cannot come in. So I think that got clarified. The bigger question was, in full transparency, I'm a trained structural engineer, but I haven't practiced civil engineering for 2 decades. I did spend a couple of hours trying to read through all the material. My concerns were from a core engineering practice in terms of have we done the due diligence. And I'm not able to reconcile with myself to the fact if there was due diligence done. And as I sat through the arguments the other day between the coach and the peer review consultant and the other engineers, lots of engineering discussions, but the core issue, for example, on the factor of safety, is it 1.5, is it 1.3? It didn't get clarified from my perspective. That was one. The bigger concern is, I think Ms. Hutchinson, she was talking about the potential for landslide and some areas of Grafton, or the areas of Grafton having been probably defined, or some reference to having a risk from a landslide perspective. When I equated that to the factor of safety and how do we test it out, did we have a fulsome test to eliminate the potential risk of the landslide? That was not something I was able to really grasp and say, did we do our due diligence to check out and see, have we covered the full test scenario? Right now I'm a software engineer. For the last 20 years I've been a software engineer. We do end-to-end testing. I know it is non-destructive testing from software engineering, but when it comes to civil engineering, there could be something more. I'm not the expert. I don't profess to be an expert. That is where I'm still stuck in terms of, are we as a team, have we looked at all the possible points of failure or aspects of failure, and have we made ourselves comfortable with that? And that was the reason I said I had voted against not stopping any public discussions around this. I still don't have an answer. Long story short, I still don't have an answer. Can we still do further due diligence, or do we still need to do any further due diligence around this aspect?
just to say out loud for myself, I think I don't have a great sense on that either at a personal level, but I think it comes down to, how much do we have to trust the engineers that we've hired to review the work. And from my interpretation of what they said, that they felt confident that this was adequate, compared to other developments similarly. This was a good, adequate level of safety, the ones that we've hired to review.
I agree.
And, it's one of those things that I also don't feel we can expect anyone to say definitively, yes, we're going to eliminate all problems, all potential problems. That's,
Right.
So,
So, Justin, if I may, I'm not doubting what our peer review engineer said.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is that I did not hear our peer review engineer, I did not hear him clarify if the factor of safety, for example, was 1.5 or 1.34, or whichever was the number. I didn't hear clarity around a specific number. So from core engineering principles, you talk facts, that didn't come out clear. And I do, from our perspective, he is the expert
Yes.
who was reviewing that piece. So I do have complete appreciation of that fact. He did say in English that he feels comfortable the test was fine or test was adequate. But I am questioning, in terms of facts, was the test adequate, or should we do expand the test, not additional test? Is there a possibility for expanding the test and eliminate? If there is a risk, there is a risk, and there are mitigation factors. I don't know. There could be ways of preventing or mitigating landslide. I'm just making this up, right? But operating in an uncertainty and an unknown, that is where I'm finding myself challenged. That are we doing enough of due diligence before coming up with the decision? I didn't hear in a very concrete fashion from the peer review engineer that based on these 3, 4, 5 facts, I feel comfortable. It was like, I feel this is adequate. That's all I heard. So that's where my discomfort comes.
So,
And I
I mean,
think-
one of the things is with the consultants, if we need to ask them clarifying questions regarding their report, can you expound upon why this is adequate or not? We are able to do that during deliberations. We just don't have to just take the documents as they are in front of us. We can ask clarifying questions to then help us interpret what's needed. So if there is something that the board has as far as for the peer consultant to clarify a statement or something that was made, we are able to ask that. Same thing as far as if we're looking for any sort of opinion from staff or something like that. We're able to do that. Just because the hearing's closed doesn't mean that we can't ask follow-up. We can't ask for new testimony, but to clarify something in a report saying, can you define what is the difference between 1.3 and a 1.5? So that you can answer like, okay, is that a significant issue? That is something that you can do.
Did they not say, though, that in our professional opinion, whichever safety factor they were speaking of was sufficient?
Yes, correct.
All right.
But I think
Unless we plan to substitute our opinion about adequate safety factor over licensed professionals, I think gets to be a problem.
Correct. Only in that if it results in someone, say, wanting to abstain or vote against a motion because they'd like a little bit more confidence. I mean, that's where.
Yeah, let me suggest that if after reviewing our peer consultants' reports, if there are additional questions that you have or any of you have that we need some, well, what did you really mean this, or what is, help me understand what you're trying to say here. That's the kind of thing that yes, if any of us have questions like that, it would certainly be worth raising those questions, asking the respective consultants to address those questions. If something in their report is unclear to us, any one of us, and as you said, Joe, I think we certainly have the ability to ask those kind of questions, just to make sure we clearly understand what our consultants, what their evaluation is and what it means for us.
So can I ask one question? So, because I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, I was absent. But before the last meeting of 12th August, when we had the public hearing, based on the survey, there was one, I guess, gap in the sense that there was one study not done in terms of geology. Was that?
I think that's what we're
Okay, so-
referring to as peer consultant for the geotechnical report. So like we had a peer consultant for traffic and general civil at the last hearing, which all the material is online, and to sort of maintain your eligibility, although we have a full board, we'll at least send out a affidavit so that you can sign it, and just reviewing that hearing, even if it's just for that item, just so that we can at least say everyone has been following the proceedings from start to finish.
Yeah, I think as a general rule, we engage the peer consultants in the various areas precisely for the purpose of having an expert review of all the information on behalf of the town. So we really rely on their review, and generally speaking, if they say something, if they find that everything is okay, they're not looking at it from the point of view of trying to be favorable to the applicant or trying to find everything possible negative. They're looking for, and they typically find, Graves finds all these little details, and they all get straightened out. But the peer reviewers are there to provide an expert opinion to us as to whether everything is in order and consistent with all of our requirements.
Yeah, you haven't seen, the peer review was posted
Yeah,
very close to the last meeting, the one that
yeah,
you weren't here for.
It's all
If you haven't, you need to read through it. It's technical. But I don't mind getting clarification, but I'm concerned that if the clarification, I think with what we have on the record, at the close of the hearing, I would say that we don't have enough that I could sustain saying no on the basis of those geotechnical concerns. If we ask for more information to come in and it swings it from yes to no, that's more than just an explanation. If it comes to an appeal, that's really the standard. What happens if there's an appeal is really my standard, to figure out what's fair or what's advisable to do. So, I don't know. In electrical engineering, you don't have a lot of safety factors like that to worry about. When you build bridges, you do.
Right, and my last project that I did was an atomic power plant. So the factor of safety was.
And how did that work out? Which one?
One of them is shut down.
That's the type of project for which you really bend over backwards to make sure you've got a big margin of safety.
Right, and my role there was a design engineer. So, to Bob's point, what I'm trying to do for myself is trying to find out, go from no to yes, and what is that I need to go from no to yes, and I want to make sure that I ask my questions and understand it. I do, if it's okay, I don't know if it's okay. Can I also reach out to and talk to Brigadi and team, or I should not talk to them? I should not. Okay.
No, if there's any, because we also are able to get clarifying statements from, if there's information that was needed to explain a point, but it's a lot more limited when you ask for something from the applicant to explain something, because it has to be really narrowly focused as far as what that scope was. I mean, it's anything that we have to ask for clarification. Definitely would want to run it by myself and Dave, and even town council, depending on where that is, just to make sure that we are asking just a clarifying question, not asking for testimony or new testimony. So while it is possible, I mean, one of the main things, and that's why I'm here, is say I'm having trouble with this issue. Can you, as in me, help sort of get handle on this, and why like a decision like this could be made. I have had instances where we have asked, not in Grafton, in other towns, working with town council, clarifying question from a developer and their attorney, It is allowed, but we have to be mindful. Anytime you do that, it's a potential that if it's something that changes something, gives someone an easy way of appealing that decision, saying that should have been done in open session, and that's technically new testimony, and then things get messy.
So let me.
I try not to get messy things.
Sure. So then I'll spend some more time, pull my questions or my concerns together. As I said, I'm trying to go from no to yes, and I do want to get certain things clarified before I can do that. I will send it to you and the chairman, and then you guys can tell me what's the next step after that.
I found the dead end road thing. If we're done with that.
Mm-hmm.
Dead end road, definitions. 2.1.1.27. Street, dead end, which is what the 500-foot rule applies to, I think. A street, extension of a street or system of streets connected to another street at one point only. Any proposed street which intersects with a dead-end street shall be deemed to be an extension of the dead-end street. In other words, a system of roads constitutes a dead-end street. And we've always understood that the way to apply the 500 feet is the longest, to the most distant point by whatever path is the shortest to it. Yeah, down there at the bottom.
Yeah, so this loop road,
Is a
whether it's
system of
complete or
streets.
incomplete, is a system of streets. It does fit that definition.
Yes. That's what I've struggled with for 27 years.
Mhm.
So what happens? What's the implication? I don't follow. Say if it's a dead
The
end street.
implication is that they need a waiver to go almost, like twice the allowed distance. I don't vote in favor of waivers of that rule, because we have the rule, and once you start waiving it, you've changed the rule in effect. As a practical matter, unless you have, because the next person comes along and said, but you let them do it.
Set a procedure.
You have to, and the way we looked at it is some sort of a compelling public benefit may be enough. But that's a hard test, and okay, we go from 500 to 600 sometimes, but not as much as we have here. So I'm, as long as everybody else is happy, that's not a problem. But if others aren't, then that's a big problem.
And if you could help me on this, so the reason why we have the 500 feet for whatever is the dead end, there should be some risk associated with that. Some kind of risk associated with that, right? Isn't that why?
These rules were adopted in the 80s based on experience predating that. There was a major change in everything in the 80s based on previous experience. We have some areas where it's a lot more than 500 feet, and the boards in the day felt that way. We can change the rule if we want, but it's the rule. And I've upheld the rule.
My one feeling on this and why I lean more toward being okay with this rather than another development that might come along that's also this length is just that the only really other egress for this site is straight to Church Street as well down that incline, which was determined to be not really a good stopping point. Am I?
Yeah,
But
but
that's not always a.
everybody who comes in with this situation is trying to develop a piece of land that doesn't have the connections it needs, and you make more land developable on lower standards. You can change all the rules the ones that are in the zoning, you have to, it's harder to change. But anything we can give a waiver for, you can toss, but
I am of the opinion that if you're going to interpret a loop road as a system of streets, we need to clarify this definition, because this is one of those things that I don't see the same thing you see in this definition.
it's okay, I do, and I have, and you're the, what, the fifth, sixth planner? And most of them have been stuck with this. In any case, if I'm the only one, I can be happy and everybody else can be happy. If I'm not the only one, I sure hope that you have a good rationalization for allowing it in the decision. And separates it from all other similar cases.
Well, I think part of the thing is exactly as what Justin said, is that the design aspect was chosen as the least environmentally and least invasive means.
Put it this way, the configuration of the land, at least on paper, without considering the topography, allows for multiple roadway connections, but the topography basically makes that impractical. That's sort of,
Yeah.
that
So
is
it's not
a
an option.
consideration.
It's not an option.
It's not, yeah.
I don't know that I saw a plan that demonstrated that it was an option within the design standards.
Right, because
Slope.
yeah, and that's yeah, I mean, whatever will be will be.
Yeah, so in this
It
case,
necessitated not allowing any trees on Church Street, and knowing that there's not an exhibit for the board to point to make that determination is likely then failing on staff side not to push that they submit that to then justify that waiver, because fire department didn't like it, conservation planning didn't like it. It was possible, but it just cleared out the whole side of the hill.
I don't know that a road is possible. I don't know how the slopes work out.
But if the road is not possible, when you say that, it's not commercially viable, or is it?
No, well, I think it may not be engineering possible because of the slope, particularly if the road has to be 600 feet from West Street, where it intersects Church Street.
yes, it's not, in any case, it's not as part of the record upon which we have to base the decision, there is no documentation of a designed alternative that allowed for this not to be a dead end. Now, given that, I mean, one observation I can make is that given the layout of the land and the topography and the informal determination prior to submission that there was no practical second access into this, the application of this rule results in this land being nearly undevelopable, with the exception of anything you could put right there at the end of West Street.
Residentially.
Yeah, and of course the alternative, should the board not allow anything to be done here, of course, is Chapter 40B.
Yes, and I'm not going to sign on to a decision that says I'm giving a waiver because I'm afraid of a 40B. Even though you're absolutely right and it's a problem. But we as soon as we start,
We don't
as
generally.
soon as we start guessing that there might be a 40B and making decisions based on that without even.
We have avoided making decisions on that particular basis in the past.
Yes, and
That's not, while we all understand that that's a possibility, that's not, we should not let that influence our decision.
yes, and the planning board even had the case where it was considering a subdivision and was continuing to consider it after the developer also filed on the same land for a 40B, and both were going on at the same time.
Interesting.
You remember that?
I don't remember, that was certainly before my time on this board. But if it was back in the early 90s.
They're having trouble getting their road accepted right now.
Oh, yes.
What's 40B?
That one.
40B, oh, you better have an explanation of what 40B
Did you say which one?
What is 40B?
What is
Yeah.
yeah,
Affordable housing.
we probably don't want to take a lot of time. Very briefly, it's a way to develop a piece of property. The state calls it a comprehensive permit, and it's under the affordable housing provisions of state law, which says basically, you know, it's a one-stop permit processed by the zoning board of appeals to build a property to build a development that includes a percentage, I think it's 25% of affordable housing. And it allows you to work around a lot of local zoning rules. Basically, it's not subject to all the local zoning rules.
It's not subject to, I think wetlands still apply, but otherwise, all bets are off.
Pretty much.
Local control is gone, our subdivision standards are gone, our zoning is gone, and most important, everybody who gets denied by the ZBA goes to Boston, and we don't have a chance. The board you go to, in the case that we're talking about, a ZBA member says only one member of the board came out to the hearing and slept through it. Now, whether that's entirely true, but if you follow the track record, they don't, you know, they just rubber stamp, yes, and override what the ZBA says.
Yeah, so you might want to find some time to
Sure.
do a deeper dive on that. The short answer is, if someone, and not specific to this development, there have been other cases where that possibility occasionally gets, but if they can't get an approval from the planning board under our existing zoning and subdivision rules, you know, they have an option to bypass that and go.
Well, there is a 2-year cooling off period. They can't get denied by the planning board and then come in with a 40B. And 40B basically requires 10% of every community to have 10% of their housing stock as protected, affordable. And 40B basically just allows for the framework of relief from local permitting regulations. It can be a tool that even the towns can use. We could use it for our own town project, or very much it gets used as almost a hammer for communities. And unfortunately, most of Grafton's experience has been where 40B has been used as a hammer rather than utilizing it as a creative way to provide affordable housing.
But getting back to the topic at hand.
Correct.
The Brigati Village. A potentially major sticking point is the roadway length. And the 6 of us, in the event that when it comes time to vote on the decision, one of us is unable to be here, need to think about this a little bit. You know, given what we've heard tonight, you know, some of the, and as Bob emphasized, you know, ignore the fact that something else might happen if we choose not to allow it. But nevertheless, we are responsible for rendering a decision under the applicable laws and regulations, namely the zoning bylaw and the applicable portions of the subdivision rules and regulations. So we have to think about perhaps more than anything else, you know, what position we're all going to take on that question of the roadway length. And however exactly you define it, it's, this is a roadway configuration that this board has always viewed as a dead end. And even if you measure from Church Street to the entrance to this, you're already at just about 500 feet, right?
Just over,
I
I
think
believe.
maybe 300, but it's someplace in the 3 to
You're
500.
pretty close to it, so take that into account. And how do we want to interpret the loop road? Does it make a difference if the loop road is open, or if it's a complete loop versus an incomplete loop with those grass pavers? You know, does that make a difference in how we want to view it? You know, and I don't think I want to ask for I mean, we know how Bob feels, which is how Bob has always felt about this. And the rest of us who've been around long enough to act on these matters have, in some cases, granted a waiver from the strict 500 feet, but I don't know that we've ever gone as far as this might require. So there's some question about that.
We've had cases up to 600 more than once.
And I think we might have been looking at one that was around 700, but I don't think
Oh, no, we have that issue, as a matter of fact,
that's
at the
an-
ridings.
At the ridings, yeah, which we haven't resolved yet.
No. Well.
That's still sort of on the table for, it will come up when we get back to the definitive on ridings. So that's, yeah, are there other sort of key issues? Because other than that, I think, as Joe suggested, that staff can begin drafting a decision.
Is there any specific thing associated with traffic?
Well, I think that we beat the traffic to death pretty well and advanced through 2 or 3 different possibilities and pretty much settled on what the solution was gonna be. Not ideal, but, not an all-way stop, not a traffic light.
Well, the police also had some opinions about that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I'm saying, through all of that process,
Yeah.
police input, traffic engineers input, all of it, we settled on the plan, most recent
Yeah.
proposal.
And the kids will have to walk all the way, right, to the Church Street.
Or get driven or whatever. The bus
Well-
will not go up West Street.
Yeah, supposedly the school department won't go on a private street, and I think all of West Street is a private street, not just starting at this project.
Yep.
So the obvious place for the bus to stop is on Church Street.
And I think we at least briefly mentioned during the previous meeting, the last session of the public hearing, that this is not the only place where kids are required to walk several hundred to 1,000 feet to catch the bus. It's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Walk or be driven.
Walk or be driven, yes. The bus, the school department does not bring the school bus to every, to door to door. It just doesn't work that way, and
They
it can't.
come close.
And I'm assuming fire department is fine with that, right? I'm envisioning a scenario where you have a car park to drop a kid and there's an emergency. Is there enough egress for a fire truck to go?
I believe the fire department has reviewed these.
And we have to remember that there's going to be a striped indication as far as fire lane and no parking. That's going to be on the church side of West Street as well.
So we're doing a pretty good job of keeping this meeting going.
Yes. My only one comment just to say about one thing that I do feel strongly on, which is the fact that our geotech consultant basically did say that they recommend having a geotech engineer on site during
Oh, yeah.
construction phasing.
Yes.
I think that's something we definitely need in our findings.
Well, I
That
mean,
would be-
No
that's
question about that.
immediately was going to be a condition
Yeah.
that this is going to be needed.
So if staff is able to begin drafting, particularly as you said earlier, Joe, start with documenting, laying out all the findings, some of them which are boilerplate, some of which
Yep.
are not. And, as you work your way through that, you may have some issues that need to,
Yeah.
the findings, any waivers. Obviously, there will be at least one waiver for which the draft decision will be at least drafted to anticipate either a yes or a no vote on, but that's true of all of them, really.
Yeah.
and any conditions to the extent that we can get those, start getting a lot of that nailed down. And you may come up with additional decision points that the board needs to work on, but for now you have enough, you feel you have enough to at least
Yeah.
get to work on drafting a decision, and we can continue at our next meeting the deliberation on the decision.
Yep.
I think, do I remember correctly that one of the safety factors mentioned was 1.1? I think maybe earthquake, in the earthquake section, which, when we get down to numbers like that, I wouldn't mind hearing a little more about it. But I think basically that's generally accepted, the recommendation is essentially this is standard practice.
Yeah.
Standard practice. These numbers are standard practice.
And I would encourage all the board members to review the wealth, the rather extensive record, but particularly, some of these more technically oriented reports.
0.14 seismic coefficient.
And just to see,
0.14.
0.14.
that was one of the earthquake.
Coefficient.
Yeah, that I would like something, the worst thing, but I don't know, whatever the most,
So if,
not at all likely to happen kind of thing, but still, I don't understand safety factors with numbers like that.
so any, come up with any questions that you might need to ask the consultants to clarify their reports, or, and we'll see if we can get those, as much as possible, get questions like that answered before our next meeting. It would certainly be helpful. If we- Unless there's anything more that we need to discuss on this matter tonight, I'd say we've got a good start on the deliberations here. And to go much farther, it probably would be helpful for staff to have at least a good portion of the draft decision for us to review and look at it in some detail.
Thank God for those 2 continuances and a withdrawal. Jeez.
Aye.
Did we actually, okay, well, are you ready to move on?
Unless somebody else has anything they want to discuss on this Brigati Village, I'd say we're ready to move on. And with that, the general, thank you for your patience, and
Thank you.
we'll work on this some more.
Sounds good. So it'll be continued until, is it the 9th?
That is our next scheduled meeting, yes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.
Yes. So, just moving on the agenda then.
Yep.
Under general business, bills have been circulated and signed.
Correct.
Staff report.
Today, I uploaded a request for qualifications for consultant for historic properties survey update. You may recall from annual town meeting, the historical commission had received CPA funding, CPC funding, to update its list of historic properties. Last one, it was done 30 years ago. So. Amazingly, that brings in properties from the 60s and early 70s for being historic.
Well, that's getting to be quite a while
It's
back
nice
there.
that I'm approaching historic age as well. That's nice. That's a grant that we received to cover half of the cost. That cost was $30,000. We'll be sending out direct mailings to a list of consultants, and that process will be going on basically to wrap up June 2020. My office is providing more administrative support for that effort for the Historical Commission. Today's Monday. Friday, received in the mail the final executed documents for the 8 Pine Street. That's the Grafton State Hospital. They've been FedExed off to town council so that she can record it, and officially then we will own a former state hospital.
We will be the proud owners of a former state hospital. And we will-
Exactly.
Falling down,
We will
DCAM's
turn
already
around
for-
and try to get that into someone else's hands. to do
As soon
something
as
with.
possible.
All those ghost hunting shows.
Yes, yes. DCAM's already forwarding legal notices because of that property for hearings in Shrewsbury. So it's like, oh, great. I am working on a request for proposals. The hope is that middle of September can get things on the street. We have 3 different multifamily developers who are actually following this and have expressed interest in seeing the request for a proposal and in the project in general. So that's another thing. I've been coordinating with CMRPC, Trish Settles, as far as making some changes to the open space plan and final maps. I'm trying to get sort of a completed draft to then schedule the next open space meeting to try to go through the document one more time. Waiting to receive that before then scheduling that meeting. Other stuff that's going on in the office, working with John Allen. We are starting to do some of the organization work for Shop Grafton for the 2019 holiday season. For anyone that is also interested in utilizing social media for marketing, September 4th is going to be a workshop that he's going to be running to support local businesses.
I saw that today come around on social media. I was not clear what that's going to do. What's going to be involved there, and who's going to get what out of it.
The idea is so. One of the interesting things is that when we go around to businesses, and John goes around to businesses, and we ask how things are doing, and say, people just can't find me or stuff. And I put the portable sign out on the street, but really, I want to get more exposure. And you find out they don't have any sort of presence on social media. They don't have a website. They don't have much information. They're not even using Google to then sort of have their business information. So some of this is really focused to try to provide more of a support as far as doing that on a local business level.
Yeah, because advertising in the yellow pages isn't very effective anymore.
No, you just refer them to Quite Fetching, Reunion.
Other things that are going on, working with the building department on some enforcement issues. 88 Worcester Street, I just gave them one more heads up before then we do official enforcement for not mowing. Also dealing with some enforcement issues at Triano Trucking. They will have to come back in front of us for modification for a timeline, but they're dealing with some code issues right now. Trying to get that wrapped up before then identifying what coming in front of the planning board looks like. Did a final inspection of the Russo brothers on Creeper Hill as well. They're doing a minor change around a rain garden with conservation. Once they finish with conservation, they'll come back and just provide us with a letter for determination that it's compliance with the decision. So trying to go through a few of these construction projects, trying to make sure that they're closed out. Continuing to work with Viewpoint on scheduling a training for staff so we can get that started. Coordinating with Mass Development on starting to draft the scope of work for the current DPW site not the one that's under construction, to start that planning process for that Eastern Gateway project. That's dependent on the final report coming out from a LSP looking at the existing sites. We're waiting to get that so we can identify what the conclusions of that and then draft the scope for that project. So quite a number of things on the docket coming up for the fall, as well as working through winter in advance of next spring. And don't really see anything slowing down, so I don't know when we're going to get to some of those zoning bylaws.
Now, what about the person holding the double job? Have you hired someone?
Right now, this week is when it closes for the office manager, the administrative assistant in the planning conservation. So Leah's current job, she took Maria/Rachel. We're hiring for her position. Reason why it's taking a little bit more time, that was originally identified as being part-time. It's been decided to make that full-time. As such, to make sure we had a better pool of candidates, we re-advertised. That deadline is this coming Friday, so we'll start interviewing after that. There's enough stuff that's going on that really we need the full-time administrative support. You know, including MS4 stormwater reporting information and handling that, as well as things with the Affordable Housing Trust. So you know, it's extremely busy as far as activity in the office.
Maybe this would be a place just to ask. I don't know whether you've seen social media that's been revisiting of Jonkus.
You are my eyes and ears on social media.
It surfaces quite often. You know,
Yeah.
they talk about the bomb craters and whatnot on the road, and you know, what is it, how do we get it fixed? It's a private road, blah blah blah. I know how subdivision roads get accepted, because the question is, how do we get it accepted? And I don't think that's a pre-existing private way,
Yeah.
not built to any standards, and so on and so on. I think elsewhere, I've known that if somebody wanted to get their road accepted, they had to bring it up to
Correct.
town standards. And then the process, exactly where that requirement is, I'm not quite sure. And the process, I don't think they come through the planning board at all, do they? I think they just, don't they have to go to the selectmen and get it laid out and decreed, and then go to town meeting for acceptance?
You're essentially, you have that essentially correct. One of the main things is that Jonkus is not laid out. There's an access easement that goes over it.
Yeah.
My understanding is that basically Charlie Bollock, when he was alive, would basically just grade things out and just managed it. Now with ownership a little less engaged, and with the property for sale, yes, that is not happening. The challenge is that it would require a layout and bringing up to standards, and that's also established within the subdivision control law. But the main thing is then you're talking about those property owners laying it out. Is it feasible that the town could do it by eminent domain? Yes, but
That requires a town meeting vote
it does.
and payment and whatnot.
Right.
But first of all, this is mixed in with our North Grafton
Correct.
project, and it came up, and I remember we looked at it in plans. And I went back to Map Geo today, and essentially the road is all within what Map Geo shows as the lot for the one house,
Correct.
not the property, the Bolak property. Give or take the fact that one of the Bolak buildings is in
Correct.
that. But aside from that, it's really, if that's accurate, that it's a homeowner's problem, And I think are they not concerned about, someone getting hurt or having, damage on that road that they're not restricting, that they're allowing people to drive on?
I know I would not even in a town vehicle go down that road. I've walked it since, but the challenge ends up being that it's an access easement, and responsibility and liability are with the property owner, and then who the benefit of that easement is. It's not an accepted town road. It's
Except the easement is within, who's the easement's beneficiary?
that I'm trying to remember because we last had a meeting 4 years ago on this.
Okay.
To try to identify, this is on the staff side, what was necessary. And essentially you needed everyone involved to then establish a layout. And because of that building being a tiny corner, and I think it's only the steps of that building actually being on the line, you then, to meet town standards, you'd have to enlarge it and move it. That means you're going more onto private property than what was there. In our office, John and I are making more of an effort once Labor Day is over for sort of marketing some of our development opportunities, and that's one of them. We continually try to put out there for people inquiring about development opportunities, that site, because that would probably be a faster recourse developing that than trying to go through. Is it possible? Yes, we could deal with all the property owners, lay something out, and then sort of push back. But then it's very often something that the property owners need to come to the table and want to be able to do. It's themselves too.
I'm still not clear whether the access easement is to the benefit of the Bolak parcel, because it's on what we show as the house's parcel.
Yeah.
Actually, that land would have to be given up in some way.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look back
Right
at the
away
registry of
over it
deeds and
and
almost
then-
run a title search back to see where it's coming from.
There ought to be, I think it goes too far back to easily get online, just going into the records, what do you call it?
Well, it's that Jonkus property, the one that is like a hat.
One.
It's really just
one
looking
Jonkus
at one or
there.
two deeds, because that deed is essentially encumbered by that easement. So any transfer of that would reference that original easement.
Right, but I think I tried to track it down, and it went before what I could easily get on the registry of deeds site. And the other, and the correspondence, we got a letter from, or we got a copy of a letter regarding 155 George Hill and 29 Rear Leland. Did we vote our position, or were we waiting to hear what the conservation said?
No, we voted.
We
We
did
voted
vote.
ours.
We did vote.
We talked about
We
wanting
voted-
to hear what they had to say.
We voted, we were interested in hearing
Yeah.
what they had to say,
Yeah.
but we voted our
Okay.
recommendation based upon our own opinion.
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of 155 George Hill Road, there is some construction activity going on there today. It appeared that they were, when we drove by, it was around the mid-afternoon, there was a truck there. It appeared that they were, they were moving some of the rocks from behind the wall, and they were probably getting ready to place some of the erosion control.
Yep. And so with special permits, what's able to happen is that they're able to provide a letter to the building department saying that we're proceeding at our own risk.
Yes.
It still needs to be inspected and all those things, but
Yeah, because-
they're taking some of the actions that are required by the scenic road as far as they need to relocate the stones and those things. And I had told them that you need to put up the erosion controls that would be associated with any sort of disturbance, associated with moving that stone wall, and protect against erosion should we get it's hurricane season technically, any sort of rainfall that then would come into that drainage swale and potentially across the road. You have to start controlling some of that. So knew they were going to start doing some of the work, and that I'll be going out numerous times this week to take a look at erosion controls once it's up.
And I think I can remember a case or two over the years that they've started the work prior to the expiration of the appeal period, but as you point out, they do so at their own risk.
Yep.
Yeah, they did that up on the top of Keith Hill at Old Upton.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, do we have any idea what's happening? Not that it's our business, with the culvert on Stowe Road. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, the bridge, at the water.
The Stowe Road,
Oh, where it's one way?
Where the
Yes.
Misco flows under.
I don't
Okay, you
know.
Because I heard strange stuff from somebody.
Yeah.
But it's a one-lane, it's a temporary one-lane bridge that's been there now for a year.
Yes, several months ago, I had a conversation with Paul Canoria about that, and he said they were planning on doing I think I got the impression he was hoping to get it done this summer, but the summer is almost over. But what they're going to do is drop a box culvert in there.
Okay, because someone was saying that they had seen something that involved a bridge and $3 million and stuff like that, and that just doesn't
No,
sound
that
right.
doesn't sound right.
But what I want to know is whether they can accidentally bump the beaver dam while they're doing that. Because the Great Meadow is now the Great Lake.
Yeah.
And I know you can't I guess you can't touch beavers, although I'm told that private trappers, under the right conditions, can. I don't know what the market in beaver hats is these days, but,
It's illegal.
All righty.
well, I know that you look, the water's practically ready to come over the road.
So Bobby,
That something happens to that dam, I don't know.
if you want to continue, I can make the motion to extend past 10.
No,
You don't wanna do that.
I have a question going back to, if I may.
Yeah, anything more on staff report?
On the September 4th, social media. So is there a general, what is the agenda here? There are some businesses that I'm aware of. I have had conversations with them primarily in South Grafton. They are trying to get on social media, publish their presence and stuff. Is that the agenda that the town or somehow would we be able to help these businesses? They are not.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll have John email you sort of like a synopsis, so then you could forward it around to other people.
And make them aware of this
Yeah.
session that he's
Right,
having.
right. So there is a new Fancy House Pizza. I was talking with them. They don't even have a Facebook page. And Eddie, the owner now, he's trying to get out there and publish themselves. Then there's this Smart
And-
Streetcar.
And I'm actually helping my wife's family counseling business doing the same thing, where I'm just doing a Google search for planning department. Something as simple as this, making sure that you fill out a Google/My Business account does wonders as far as then coming up in
Is that a
searches.
paid
And so many
service?
so many people don't have that. Like, so planning department, I then have created an account where then, you can add the website, you can add directions, you can provide more description. That's where John's trying to just, and this other company he's bringing in to then speak to this, is what can you do to elevate your business? Everyone, the default on even iPhones and Android is Google for search. What can you do to then make sure you come to the top? It's stuff like that John's trying to provide some assistance.
That would be of tremendous help. And we have a community in Grafton called the Blackstone Valley India Society. And we are trying to get in high school kids to do these kinds of projects so they can be, it's a volunteer service. They can also help out the local businesses and setting up websites. There are many free services available. So once you send me that, I'll work with these folks and let them know That way,
Yeah.
they can get onto some listing. They just need to be visible. They are not, and
Yeah.
they need some help.
And that's where also, if you actually come to the town's website, you come to doing business, it brings you to our economic development page. And we do have business directory where then you can submit for your business want to submit a business
listed.
listing.
Fantastic.
And at least then what we try to do is then when we sort of in between sort of to fill out things, identify, like here's a business directory and then at least it's searchable so that if people want to look at the directory and see who is there for dining, we don't have all that many. So
Right.
we still encourage people to fill this out to get their information, and at least then having your business in a couple locations then can start to increase their discoverability.
Absolutely. Even if they get there
Yep.
on this page, they will still be listed out on a Google search.
Yep, exactly.
Do you know if that economic development page has its own domain name that brings you to it also? You know what
So
I'm
we
saying?
do have Grafton Works,
All right. I have a reason.
and
separate.
that brings it back here.
Right.
to EDC.
There's been this thing about graftontv.org and
Yeah.
Tim throwing it away, and I don't think he understands that it's like that now. Be that as it may. What was the other thing? I had something else. Can't think what it was. You said you mentioned a company as part of this thing on the 4th. Is that,
I just forget what it is.
But is that a company that sells services? Like
Um,
helping people do
they-
this?
I'm trying to remember the details.
Okay.
I'll forward you off the information to the because he had done this for used sort of a similar company back in the spring and did something about like starting up a business or something like that. But I'll forward you out the information. So and I'll remind him that we should make sure that on our Facebook that we also put that out so that people can share that. I'm just looking quickly to see if it's actually on Grafton Works.
I saw a video about with just.
And that was on the town. That was through the towns.
Yeah.
But I'll pass things along to all of you. Yeah. Okay.
So Grafton Works Facebook page is our planning department's.
It's myself and John administer it as a way of sort of doing more business focus, and then things that are really more the planning and conservation department are really more to the activities of the actual department.
But the Grafton Works, the economic development is still within the town's
Yes.
website
Yep.
structure on
It's
virtual
just
town hall.
Yep. Yeah. So when you go to the town of Grafton and you go to the top for business, doing business, that then brings you to the EDC site.
You know if there are any others on the town website like that?
No.
No, you don't know, or no?
No, there aren't. I mean, the police department is not hosted by virtual town hall. Same thing with library. So when you go to theirs, yes, it looks totally different because it's also being managed totally different. Here, because it's all virtual town hall, it falls under the same pricing model, but then gives us a little bit more flexibility as far as fine tuning things specifically for business. So.
Anything else under a staff report or correspondence?
The only thing is, you may have noticed that put in a letter regarding the Blackstone Greenway. There was a Surface Transportation Board meeting. It's interesting how what was once a local transportation Worcester Providence Railroad is now owned by a large national conglomerate, and they want to handle off some sort of maintenance to this other entity. So, giving me about 5 hours notice of a deadline, I got a request to send off letters saying, please make sure that if there's any consideration, they encourage working with the communities of the Blackstone Valley for supporting the bikeway. So that's where that letter came about. Other than that, just a bunch of legal notices from Worcester and surrounding towns.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Well, I do have a. Sorry. I
The
do
chair
have-
was not quite ready to recognize the motion to
Do
adjourn,
we
although
need
it's
to
about
extend
this
past
far
in,
away.
No,
Oh.
we don't. So I had the CPC meeting this past week. The few things of note there is that the super park is going to be not on the warrants for this coming fall town meeting. Bill Yemen sent a letter that he pointed out some potential concerns with regard to the library granting with the use to regards to the parking lot. So there's going to be some investigation there to find out if his concerns hold actual water, or if what the actual thing. We don't want to jeopardize the grant for the library. The other things on the CPC for warrants are not really that noteworthy for our board, but there was also a conversation there about signage for CPC, like we sponsored this, so we're sponsoring this project. And one thing I told them that I would look into is there was like a picture on a phone from our CPC's chairman that basically was showing a temporary sign, as I would call it, of this is being funded by by the CPC, where I told them I would look into our sign bylaws and kind of give a little bit of my perspective as a planning board member on how this fits into, is there a blanket waiver in the bylaws to support them doing that, or if they need to ask for it project by project, or should we try to make a change to allow that as well?
I think that there's a provision for all town signs to be.
I mentioned I believed that there was. I just have
Yes.
not looked into it since this past meeting.
Yes.
That's why they can park that e-sign down at the Carroll Road.
Yeah, the one question to me on that interpretation is, would a sign that a developer puts up for a project that CPC is funding, to say the
It ought to be
CPC
the
is
CPC putting it up.
like the CPC might be providing the sign, but it's going on the project that CPC is funding, saying we're funding this or we funded this. Does that count as a town sign or not? I don't. That's the.
Ask Bob.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those
Yeah.
things. Even if I give you my opinion, it's Bob Berger.
Okay.
Ultimately, he's the pope on that one, and it comes down to his interpretation whether or not it's municipal or not. So
Yeah.
Maybe set down a guideline as to how to make it work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could foresee that being a good thing for CPC projects to have, and if our bylaws don't support it, I could foresee us looking to add a phrasing in there that allows it without having special grant, so to speak.
Yes, that's sort of a peculiar case, and depending on Bob Berger's reading on that, it could be that we specifically say no permit shall be required for any sign erected by the town or by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or any subdivision or agency thereof. That provision conceivably, if necessary, could be extended to say cover a sign required by the town for a municipally funded project or something. I'm not going to try to wordsmith it now, but that concept could be included there if we felt it was warranted.
How much municipally funded stuff do we have that isn't being done for the town, on town property?
There is one thing that is going to be going before the town for fall meeting for the Nipmuc Homestead, where they're going to be doing some renovation work inside and making that more.
Yeah,
historically accurate.
generally speaking,
Yeah.
CPC funding may be used for projects undertaken by private organizations.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so that would be a case, that may be just about the
Although
only case that falls in
He
that
said
category.
other political subdivisions, the tribe as a nation. I don't know how self-governing it is
They're-
now.
I don't think they are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth.
No, well, no, but they're a political subdivision.
Yes.
All right. Again, I'm
All
ready
right.
to adjourn.
If there are no other reports from planning board representatives and town committees and CMRPC, the chair will recognize a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?